The telegram in Olivia Harlow's trembling hands spoke volumes of her shattered hopes, a stark contrast to the dust and heat swirling through the small Wyoming town of Promise Creek. Her intended husband's rejection, "Cannot marry woman of insufficient means," burned worse than the summer sun of 1878. At 22, being labeled too poor for marriage stung with a particular cruelty in a frontier where a woman alone faced countless hardships. "So much for Eastern gentlemen," Olivia muttered, crumpling the paper and tossing it into the dry goods store's waste bin. She'd spent her last dollars on the finest dress she could afford, a modest blue calico that now seemed a foolish investment. Her small satchel contained all she owned in the world: a few clothes, her mother's silver hairbrush, and exactly 73 cents. "Everything all right, Miss Harlow?" Mr. Peterson, the storekeeper, asked with genuine concern. The entire town knew of her situation, arriving 3 months ago with hopes of marriage, working at the local boarding house while awaiting her fiancé's arrival, only to receive this devastating news. "Perfectly fine," she lied, squaring her shoulders. "Just a change of plans." Outside the store, Promise Creek bustled with its usual afternoon activity. The town had grown rapidly since the railroad had come through 2 years prior, bringing with it miners, merchants, and those seeking new beginnings in the West. Olivia had been among those hopefuls, answering a matrimonial advertisement that promised security and respectability with a businessman from back east who had interests in Wyoming. "Miss Harlow," a voice called from across the street. Mrs. Winters, the boarding house proprietress, waved her over. The older woman's face showed sympathy that made Olivia's stomach clench. News traveled faster than wildfire in a town this size. "I've heard about that scoundrel," Mrs. Winters said. "You're welcome to stay on, working for your room and board until you decide what's next." Olivia nodded gratefully, though the offer stung her pride. She'd come west to build a life, not to scrub floors indefinitely. But beggars couldn't be choosers, as her late mother often said. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I appreciate your kindness." As she crossed back toward the boarding house, the afternoon stage rolled in, bringing with it a cloud of dust and the usual excitement. Olivia paused, watching as passengers disembarked: a family with small children, an elderly gentleman, and a tall figure who caught her attention immediately. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work and open spaces. His broad shoulders were covered by a dust-coated duster, and the Stetson pulled low couldn't hide a strong jawline shadowed with several days' worth of beard. A cowboy, clearly the kind Olivia had been warned about by her late mother. Dangerous, unpredictable men who lived by their own rules. As if sensing her scrutiny, he turned. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the busy street. His were startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin. He touched the brim of his hat in a brief acknowledgement before turning away to collect his belongings from the stage. Olivia hurried on, embarrassed to be caught staring. She had more pressing concerns than handsome strangers. With her planned marriage in ruins, she needed to determine her next steps. The West was unforgiving to unmarried women without means or connections. Later that evening, as she served dinner to the boarding house guests, Olivia found herself face to face with the cowboy from the stage. Up close, he was even more striking, tall and broad-shouldered, with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and pleasant. "Name's Blake Pritchard. I'll be staying a spell." "Olivia Harlow," she replied, setting down a plate of Mrs. Winters' beef stew. "Welcome to Promise Creek. Thank you kindly." His gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, making her cheeks warm. Over the next several days, Olivia couldn't help noticing Blake Pritchard. He rose early, often gone before breakfast, returning dusty and tired in the evenings. Unlike some of the other men in town, he was unfailingly polite, always addressing her as Miss Harlow and thanking her for even the smallest services. One evening, as she cleared away his dinner plate, he startled her by asking, "Are you from these parts originally, Miss Harlow?" She paused, usually keeping her personal affairs private. No, Ohio, I came west 3 months ago. Family here. No family anywhere, Mr. Pritchard. She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but something about his direct gaze made dishonesty seem impossible. Call me Blake, he said. And I'm sorry to hear that. The West can be a lonely place without kin. I manage well enough, she replied, lifting her chin slightly. His smile was warm. I can see that you do. A week after his arrival, Olivia encountered Blake at the general store. She was counting pennies for a small packet of tea, a luxury she rarely afforded herself when he appeared beside her. Allow me, he said, placing coins on the counter. I couldn't possibly, she began. Consider it thanks for making sure my coffee cup is always full at breakfast, he insisted. A man appreciates small kindnesses on the frontier. Their fingers brushed as she accepted the tea, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. Thank you. My pleasure, Miss Harlow. That night, Olivia lay awake in her small room at the boarding house, thinking of Blake Pritchard's kindness and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She chided herself for such foolishness. Men like Blake, wandering cowboys with nothing but their saddles and skills, weren't the marrying kind. And even if they were, she had already proven herself unworthy of marriage according to society's standards. The following Sunday, Olivia sat alone in church, as was her custom. She was surprised when Blake slid into the pew beside her. Hope you don't mind the company, he whispered as Reverend Taylor began his sermon. She shook her head, acutely aware of his presence beside her, the clean scent of soap, the way his Sunday clothes fit his broad shoulders, how his hands, though calloused from hard work, held the hymnal with care. After the service, they walked together in the mild spring sunshine. You're good with horses, she observed, having seen him exercising a spirited mare the previous day. Been around them all my life, he replied. My father raised quarter horses in Texas before the war. Taught me everything I know. Is that where your family is now, Texas? A shadow crossed his face. They're gone. Farm was lost during the war. I've been on my own since I was 16. I'm sorry, she said, understanding the pain of being utterly alone. Life happens as it will, he said philosophically. What about you? What brought you all the way from Ohio? Olivia hesitated. The humiliation of her failed engagement was still raw. A promise that didn't materialize, she finally said. Blake studied her face. Their loss, he said simply. As April turned to May, Olivia found herself seeking out Blake's company, drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected kindness. He told her stories of cattle drives and the wide open spaces of Texas, Montana, and Wyoming. She shared tales of her childhood in Ohio and the dreams that had brought her west. I always wanted adventure, she admitted one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. My mother thought it terribly unladylike, Blake chuckled. Nothing wrong with a woman having spirit. The West needs that. Not everyone agrees. Most men seem to want a wife who's decorative and undemanding. Most men are fools, Blake replied, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. One afternoon, Mrs. Winters called Olivia into her small office at the boarding house. Olivia, dear, you've been a tremendous help these past months, but I must speak frankly. There's talk in town about your friendship with Mr. Pritchard. Olivia stiffened. We're merely acquaintances. Perhaps, but perceptions matter for a young woman without family. Your reputation, my reputation, Olivia interrupted, her cheeks burning. I've done nothing improper. Of course not, dear, but you're in a precarious position, without means or family connections, too poor to be respectable, you mean, Olivia said bitterly. Mrs. Winters looked uncomfortable. I merely suggest caution. Mr. Pritchard seems a decent sort, but he's a cowhand. Such men rarely settle in one place for long. That evening, Olivia avoided Blake, serving dinner quickly and retiring early to her room. But the next morning he caught her as she hung laundry in the backyard. Have I offended you somehow, Miss Harlow? He asked directly. Not at all, she replied, not meeting his eyes. Then why are you avoiding me? She sighed, setting down her laundry basket. Mr. Pritchard, Blake, he corrected, Blake. I've been reminded that a woman in my position must be exceptionally careful about appearances. Our friendship has apparently caused talk, his brow furrowed. And what position is that exactly, a woman alone, without means or connections? She swallowed hard. Too poor to be respectable, apparently. Anger flashed in his blue eyes. Who said such a thing? No one directly, but it's what they think. Why I'm unsuitable for proper company. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, Blake said firmly. A person's worth isn't measured by what's in their pockets. The world doesn't share your view, she replied sadly. Then the world is wrong. He took a step closer. You're one of the richest people I know, Olivia Harlow. She looked up, startled by his use of her first name. Rich. I have 73 cents to my name. You're rich in courage, leaving everything familiar to come west alone. Rich in kindness, I've seen how you help Mrs. Winters and look after the elderly Mr. Thompson without being asked. Rich in intelligence and wit. His voice softened. And rich in beauty, though I suspect you don't know it. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her this way. You don't know me well enough to say such things, she protested weakly. I know enough, he replied, and I'd like to know more if you'll permit it. Before she could respond, Mrs. Winters called from the house, and the moment passed. But Olivia carried his words with her throughout the day, turning them over in her mind like precious stones. The following week brought unexpected news. Blake informed her that he'd taken a position with the Taylor Ranch just outside town. It's good work with fair pay, he told her as they walked by the creek one evening. And it means I'll be staying in Promise Creek for the foreseeable future. Olivia tried to ignore how this news lightened her heart. I thought cowboys preferred their freedom. Some do, he acknowledged, but I've been thinking lately that there might be more to life than drifting from job to job. Their eyes met briefly, and Olivia felt something shift between them, a possibility neither had voiced aloud. June brought scorching heat, and the town's annual Founders' Day celebration. Despite her limited means, Olivia splurged on ribbon to refresh her best dress for the dance. You look beautiful, Blake said when he came to escort her, his own appearance transformed by a clean shirt and polished boots. The town square was festooned with bunting and lanterns. As darkness fell, a small band struck up a lively tune and couples took to the temporary dance floor. May I have this dance, Miss Harlow? Blake asked formally, extending his hand. I'd be delighted, Mr. Pritchard, she replied with equal formality, though her pulse quickened at his touch. They moved together easily as if they'd been dancing for years. Blake was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man. Where did you learn to dance? She asked. My mother insisted, he said with a smile, said no son of hers would grow up without knowing how to properly lead a lady around a dance floor. As the evening progressed, Olivia noticed whispers and glances from some of the townspeople. Mrs. Simmons, wife of the bank manager, gave her a particularly cold look. People are talking, she murmured to Blake as they took a break near the refreshment table. Let them, he replied, his hand warm on the small of her back. I've never much cared for gossip. Later, as they walked back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars, Blake stopped suddenly. Olivia, he said, his voice serious, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. Was this goodbye after all? Had he grown tired of the town's judgment? I came to Promise Creek for a reason, he continued. I've been looking for a place to put down roots. I've saved nearly every dollar I've earned over the last 5 years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. I bought land, 200 acres north of town, good water, decent grazing. I'm planning to start my own small ranch. Olivia stared at him, processing this information. You're staying permanently, that's the plan. He paused, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. And I was hoping. That is, I wanted to ask if you might consider Blake Pritchard. A sharp voice interrupted. Mrs. Simmons approached, her husband the banker in tow. I believe we need to have a word. Blake's expression hardened. This isn't a good time, Mrs. Simmons. The woman ignored him, fixing her gaze on Olivia. My dear, I feel compelled to speak out of Christian charity. Are you aware of Mr. Pritchard's reputation? Olivia froze. His reputation. He's been asking questions all over town about available land, examining bank records, inquiring about cattle prices, Mrs. Simmons said accusingly. Because I'm establishing a ranch, Blake explained with forced patience. Or perhaps because you're scouting for opportunities, Mr. Simmons interjected. We've had reports of cattle rustlers operating in this territory. Strangers asking too many questions raise suspicions. Olivia looked at Blake, whose face had gone very still. That's absurd, she said firmly. Blake is an honorable man. Is he? Mrs. Simmons raised an eyebrow. Do you know him so well, Miss Harlow? A young woman in your circumstances should be especially careful about the company she keeps. Blake stepped forward. That's enough. Miss Harlow's circumstances, as you call them, are none of your concern. We're merely concerned for her welfare, Mr. Simmons said smoothly. After all, she's already been disappointed once by that Eastern fellow who discovered her lack of means. We wouldn't want her deceived again by someone with questionable intentions. The blood drained from Olivia's face, so everyone knew about her humiliation. Her failed engagement wasn't just gossip, it was common knowledge. Please excuse me, she said, turning quickly and hurrying toward the boarding house, tears threatening to spill. She heard Blake call her name, but she didn't stop. The beautiful evening lay in ruins around her. Back in her room, Olivia paced the floor. She'd been a fool to think she could escape her past, to believe that someone like Blake could see beyond her poverty to the woman beneath. Tomorrow, she decided, she would inquire about positions in other towns. Perhaps Cheyenne or Denver would offer opportunities where she could start fresh, without the weight of public knowledge about her failures. A soft knock at her window startled her. Blake stood in the moonlight, looking determined. This is improper, she whispered after raising the sash. So is letting malicious gossip stand unchallenged, he replied. Olivia, please come down, we need to talk. Against her better judgment, she slipped downstairs and out the back door to where he waited. You should go, she said immediately. If anyone sees us, let them see, he interrupted. I have nothing to hide, Olivia. Are you truly buying land? She asked directly. Yes, I've been saving for years. The deed is genuine, you can verify it with the land office tomorrow if you wish. And the accusations about cattle rustling, he sighed deeply. People fear what they don't understand. A cowboy with money to invest doesn't fit their expectations. Olivia nodded slowly. I know something about not meeting expectations. About what Simmons said your previous engagement. She turned away, embarrassment burning through her. Yes. I came to marry a man who decided I was too poor for his station once he learned of my true financial situation. What happened to your family's resources? My father died when I was young. My mother struggled to maintain appearances, but by the time she passed last year, there was nothing left but debts. I answered a matrimonial advertisement corresponding with a businessman who seemed kind in his letters. He sent money for my ticket west. She laughed bitterly. He neglected to mention that he expected a bride with a dowry. Blake's hand gently turned her to face him. He was a fool. He was practical, she corrected. A man needs a wife who brings something to the marriage, like courage, determination, intelligence. Blake shook his head. Olivia, when I said you were rich, I meant it. There are many kinds of wealth in this world, and the kind that matters can't be counted in dollars. He took a deep breath. What I was trying to say earlier before we were interrupted, I'm not just staying in Promise Creek for the land. I'm staying because of you. Olivia's heart seemed to stop. Me. From the moment I saw you so proud and determined despite whatever hardships you'd faced, I knew you were someone special. These past weeks have only confirmed it. He took her hands in his. I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Harlow, and if you could see your way to giving me a chance, I'd like to court you properly. Blake, she whispered, overwhelmed, people will say you could do better, that you deserve a wife with means. Let them talk. I know what I want, and it's you exactly as you are. His blue eyes held her steadily. You're rich in all the ways that matter to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of feeling inadequate and unworthy began to crack. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "but I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of believing in happiness again, of trusting that someone could want me for myself alone." He drew her gently into his arms. "Then I'll just have to prove it to you day by day until you believe it as surely as I do." Their first kiss was tender and full of promise, a pledge under the Wyoming stars that transcended society's narrow definitions of worth. The following Sunday, Blake accompanied Olivia to church, openly taking her hand as they walked inside. The gesture wasn't lost on the congregation, nor was the protective way he stood beside her as they faced the curious and sometimes disapproving glances. After the service, Blake surprised her by addressing Reverend Taylor within earshot of several prominent townspeople. "Reverend, I'd like to formally announce my intentions to court Miss Harlow with her permission." He looked at Olivia. "If that's agreeable to you," her smile was answer enough. Over the following weeks, Blake divided his time between working at the Taylor Ranch and beginning construction on his own property. He invited Olivia to see the land, showing her where he planned to build a house, the creek that would water their cattle, the view of the mountains from what would be their front porch. "Our home," he said simply, watching her face as she took it all in. "If you'll have me." "Are you certain?" she asked. "I bring nothing but myself. And that's everything I want," he replied, drawing her into his arms. As summer gave way to fall, Olivia found herself increasingly involved in Blake's plans for the ranch. She had a good head for figures and helped him budget for supplies and livestock. Her suggestions for the house design were practical and thoughtful. "You're a natural at this," he told her one evening as they reviewed his accounts at the boarding house table. "At what?" "Building something from nothing, seeing possibilities where others might see only challenges." In October, Blake took Olivia to dinner at the town's small restaurant, an extravagance that made her protest. "It's a special occasion," he insisted. After they'd eaten, he reached across the table for her hands. "Olivia Harlow, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I came west looking for a place to belong, but I found something far more valuable. I found you." From his pocket, he produced a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest pearl. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically. "But it's yours if you want it, along with everything I am and everything I hope to be. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Promise Creek. Some, like Mrs. Winters, were genuinely happy for them. Others, including the Simmonses, were less enthusiastic, still viewing their match with suspicion. "Let them think what they want," Blake said when Olivia mentioned the mixed reactions. "We know the truth of who we are together." They were married in November in a simple ceremony at the church. Olivia wore her blue dress, refreshed with new lace collar and cuffs. Blake stood tall in a new suit, his face alight with pride as she walked toward him. "I take this woman to be my wife," he said clearly when his turn came, "knowing that she brings to our marriage riches beyond measure, courage, kindness, intelligence, and love. In my eyes, there is no wealthier woman in all the territories." As winter descended on Promise Creek, the newlyweds moved into their partially completed ranch house. It was small and simple, but to Olivia, it represented everything she'd ever dreamed of, a home of her own, built with love and shared with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. Their first Christmas together, Blake presented her with a carved wooden sign to hang by their door. It read simply, "Pritchard Ranch, where true wealth resides." "Do you like it?" he asked anxiously. Olivia traced the letters with her fingers. "It's perfect, just like the man who made it." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the small but growing herd, vegetables sprouting in Olivia's garden, and, to their joy, news that their family would expand before year's end. "Are you happy?" Blake asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors. Olivia placed his hand over her still flat stomach. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." And to think some fool once called you poor, he said, shaking his head in wonder. His rejection was the greatest gift he could have given me, she replied. It led me here to you, to this life we're building together. As twilight deepened around them, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived in Promise Creek with 73 cents and a broken heart. Now, cradled in the arms of a man who saw her true worth, she knew herself to be wealthy beyond measure, rich in love, in purpose, and in the promise of the future they would build together. "I love you, Blake Pritchard," she whispered. "And I love you, Olivia Pritchard," he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty of a man who had found his greatest treasure. "You are and always will be the richest woman in my eyes."